Fellow project managers, I hope you're doing well. I know many of you are looking to take the PMP exam and ace it. I want to give you some very quick tips today as to how you can do that. Number one, understand traditional project management, the five process groups, the 10 knowledge areas, and the 49 processes. Number two, understand the world of Agile, the Agile Manifesto values and principles. Next, understand Scrum, the 3-5-3 configuration of Scrum. And when I say understand, I mean you need to be all over it. Number four, understand the world of Kanban. What makes Kanban different from Scrum? What does it mean when we say it's a start where you are framework? Number five, understand your hybrid project management. How do you titrate a little bit of agile into a little bit of predictive, or a little bit of predictive into a little bit of agile? Number six, repeat mock exams, quizzes until you're in the 90s. Perfection is key on these quizzes. You cannot say, well, I guess I got an 80, so I'm just going to relax. No, you have to understand why you got the question wrong, close the gaps, go again until you get in the 90s. I see a lot of people taking the so-called PMI study hall, which by the way, in my mind, may actually make you very discouraged because there's a lot of wrong, bad stuff in there. But I understand some people have no choice. I feel sorry for those who feel beaten over again and again by study hall. It's amazing so many people attribute it to their success. But whatever the case, try to understand why the question said A, B, C, or D are correct. Also, remember to take a lot of drag and drop and matching quizzes because that is going to help your associations of A and B, input and output, or the Hersey Blanchard model, or servant leadership, the 10 tenets. Anything could show up on the PMP exam. If you do these things religiously, diligently, faithfully, you will ace your PMP exam. But you have to associate knowledge with decision making. You have the knowledge, you know the process groups, you know the knowledge areas, you know Agile, you know Scrum, you know Kanban, you know hybrid, but how do you solve problem A or problem B? And there's a framework for solving problems. I call it the DIGCIV framework. You must be able to apply your mental faculties to defining a problem. When you see a problem, don't even try to answer it, just define it. What is the problem in this question? That's the first letter, letter D, define the problem. Second letter is I, identify the root cause. Don't even touch the question as far as trying to solve it. I want you to begin looking at questions, define it first. What is the problem? Then identify the root cause. What is causing this? Then G, generate alternatives. What are the possible alternatives for solving this problem? I'm not saying choose an option, but just begin thinking. Train yourself to do this. From now on, when you see a question, don't just jump at the question. Define the problem first, then identify the root cause, and then generate alternatives in your head before even touching the options that come with the question. You see what I'm saying? You are going to train your brain to answer PMP questions properly. Always define the problem because a lot of times the problem we thought was the problem was never a problem. And then we go selecting options that don't even remotely come close to solving the problem. You get what I'm saying? Define that problem, identify the root cause, generate alternatives, and then choose. So there's three things you need to do before you even get to the options. And if you practice this, you are training your brain for problem solving. Because I wrote an entire book on this method. It's called DIGCIV. You can go to DIGCIV.com if you wanted to get the entire book, which will help you in real life problem solving. But for the exam, always define the problem. identify the root cause, generate alternatives, and then choose the best alternative based on the first three steps. You get what I'm saying? And you need to do this daily. So I call it DIGCIV. Define, identify, generate alternatives, choose the best alternative, implement the alternative. So in your mind's eye, as you sit there on the exam or in your practice, ask the question, did it really solve the problem? And I think about this mentally. Define the problem, identify the root cause, generate alternatives, choose the best alternative, implement it in your mind's eye. And lastly, verify that it actually worked. DIGCIV, DIXIV. This is the framework for problem solving. If you want to effectively solve problems on your PMP exam, you must go through DIXIV. Otherwise, you get a question like, there's a project manager working on a project. Project is running late. What should the project manager do? A, crash the project. B, fast track. C, change request. D, investigate what happened or analyze why. And that would be the answer. But they will never give it to you so easily. They'll shroud it in a lot of obscure information. They'll beef and pad up the question, but you need to look through the smoke and mirrors and know, I see what they're talking about. They're asking me about A, or they're asking me about B, or I can see this is the problem. You see, there's so many people who have a lot of knowledge, but when it comes to applying the knowledge to questions, they cannot. It falls apart. So I'm challenging you, do all that you need, but don't forget the part of daily reviewing questions and make them questions that are hopefully situational because the PMP exam is riddled with situational questions. You are a project manager on a project. Your SPI is zero point 0.8. Your CPI is zero point 0.5. What should you do next? You need to know what a point 0.8 and a point 0.5 means in order to know what to do. You get what I'm saying? So, my friends, I showed up today to tell you this. The exam is based on the PMP exam content outline. We are going into the outline right now because I want to give you some substance so you understand how to study, what to study, and you are doing the right things that are relevant to your success. All right. So I call this an immersion. We have a very robust, longer course on getting immersed into the world of the PMI and the PMI dogma. Very quickly, you must realize that your exam is based on three prongs. But before I get into that, let me introduce myself really quick for those who have not met me. My name is Phil Akinwale. I've been a project management professional since 2005. I have various PMI certifications. I've trained this course a gazillion times all around the world to different organizations and different entities. The organization that I founded in 2003 is called Praizion. We started off training Microsoft Project and eventually the PMP exam, leadership, program management, Agile, Scrum, and we also prep people for professional Agile and project management exams. So your exam, your PMP exam is broken down into people, process, and business. People is 42%, process is 50, business is 8. But there's also a slice of the world of agile and hybrid and the world of predictive. It is important that you stay focused on these three because when you get confused with your PMP prep, you must stay focused on what makes up your exam. This is the PMP exam content outline excerpt. And here you can see it's broken into people, process, and business. And that makes up your entire exam. Now, the content outline is broken down as follows. You have tasks and enablers in each of the domains. For example, in the people domain, you have this task. Let's take a look at task one. It reads manage conflict. So you as a professional, you are expected to be able to interpret the source and stage of the conflict, analyze the context of the conflict, and evaluate, recommend, and reconcile the appropriate conflict resolution solution. You see what I'm saying? Now, as you look at this entire document, you will get a roadmap for the exam, which is why I am going to walk you through it very quickly so you understand what is expected of you. Look at this as a final prep call for you. I'm going to mention things that you need to have gotten down. And if you haven't gotten them down, please get them down. Okay. I am also going to change the arrangement of the content outline to make more logical sense for the real world if you are going to apply this to the real world. So let's get straight into it. This is going to be like a roadmap format for the content outline. So think of it like this. The very first thing is to build a team. You don't jump into a project and immediately begin managing conflict without a team. So it didn't make sense to have task one first. So I put it further down and put build a team first. When it comes to building a team, you need to understand the five stages of team development: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. You also need to understand these dynamics reset as people join the team, as you get new team members. The second thing I put here is define team ground rules. Oh my goodness, this is so important for firms, for organizations that have multiple teams working differently. Each team should define their own ground rules. Don't bring some blanket ground rules from HR. Instead, have people develop their own ground rules. Next, we have lead a team. My mentor, John Maxwell, would say the true measure of leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And the way we influence people is different. Think about the Hersey Blanchard model. We see that we can direct, coach, support, or delegate. The way we influence different team members is going to vary depending on where they are in the process. I also mentioned the five stages of team development or Tuckman's ladder. This is very important as you get ready for your PMP exam. The next task here is build shared understanding. In building shared understanding, you're getting everyone on the same page. You're being open, you're being transparent. You are going to get questions that test your loyalty to this fact. Number five, ensure team members or stakeholders are adequately trained. Training is key. In fact, in the world of Agile, we talk about the skills marketplace. The skills marketplace is a forum where we as team members can exchange ideas about training each other and actually advertise, hey, I can do this. You want to know more about Java? Let me help you. Let me teach you. Want to know more about Python? I can teach you. So let's listen to what my buddy Roy has to say about this. Roy's my trainer and coach in all things agile. Let's listen to him and get some knowledge.
Yeah. So the idea is that the team, training does not have to be formal. It doesn't have to be expensive. It could also just be internal, two people pairing together and working together and mentoring each other. So we want to encourage that as much as possible. And that should be the team's job to improve themselves. And they should be requesting those things and doing them without being told to do so. Now, there is, of course, a slight cost to that, in that if you have two people working together to train up, it's going to reduce your capacity for a little bit. So we need to make sure that we're doing that at the appropriate times, because sometimes if you've got a hard deadline, well, guess what? Maybe we scale that one back a little bit until the deadline is met. But ultimately, you want to give the team some slack time to be able to handle those kinds of activities, because it's a long-term investment. A little bit of improvement with the team, a little bit of internal training, and the team is going to get dramatically better over a long period of time.
Well, you heard from a buddy Roy. In the world of Agile, we do things as a team sport. Moving on, the next thing we have in this array is task 13. And let me zoom in so you can see it. I know it's white on yellow, so it's hard to see. It just says mentor relevant stakeholders. Mentoring is more of telling based on experience. giving people ideas of what they can do. It's different from coaching when you boil it down, because coaching is more about bringing out the best in someone by asking them pregnant, meaningful questions to mine the brilliance. The answer always comes from the client when it comes to coaching. In mentoring, it comes from the mentor. So that is a difference. But, when we say mentor relevant stakeholders, it's more like a blanket statement to say, give them value, give them coaching, give them mentoring, whatever they need, pretty much on a personal level. Moving on, we go to task 4, empower team members and stakeholders. To empower someone, you must give authority away. John Maxwell says, only secure leaders give power to others. Only secure project managers will give power to team members. You must give power away to be as effective as can be. Now, there's certain rules that the PMI have when it comes to giving power away. And one of the things that they tell you is that you give power away within those people's level of abilities. If they are not able to effectively do a task and you are empowering them for decision making, you actually could be setting them up for failure. So it is important to always pause and ask the question, is this a good fit for this individual? Because if you give them decision making authority and they fail, well, I guess you set them up for failure. So there are many thoughts and understandings that we need to have below the surface as we study for the PMP. It's not enough to say, oh, I guess we just empower people. Understand the deeper meaning. And then when you see the questions, guess what you're going to do? You're going to slay that question because you understand the deeper meaning and you can actually see what PMI is trying to do. When they serve you questions like that, you can already see through it. Oh, you're testing my understanding of empowerment. You're testing to see if I know it's a bad idea or a good idea to empower this person. Let's listen to my buddy Roy talk about this for a little bit to give you further understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. So the team, it's part of the makeup of the team, the DNA of the team to hold themselves accountable. And it's easy to say that. It's a little bit harder to put it into practice, of course. But the good thing here is that while we're encouraging and supporting the team to hold themselves accountable and get things done when they say they're going to get done, we also have the transparency that's built into the process. So we can see when it's not happening. It's very obvious when it's not happening. And we have metrics to track that. There's one of my favorite metrics to track is something called CVC, completed versus committed. The same basic thing as a plan versus actual. It's the same basic concept, but it's not overall with a project. It's just within a sprint. So we'll measure how much stuff did the team commit to versus how much stuff did they actually get done. And it should be a very close percentage, should be right around very close to 100% every sprint. A little, plus or minus is okay, but it should be very close to 100%. And that encourages the team. We're using metrics for positive reinforcement, and we're encouraging the team to do better from a predictability perspective and hold themselves accountable to getting that work done. Absolutely. At the beginning of the sprint, we add up the total number of story points that we have committed to getting done for the sprint. At the end of the sprint, we measure how much they actually got done. So that'd be their velocity for that sprint. So we compare what they got done compared to what they committed to. And if they're only completing a small percentage, then we need a conversation, right? They're not getting the work done, right?
Good stuff from our buddy Roy there. Let's go into a question. In an agile approach, task identification and tracking should be handled by who? Is it the project manager? Is it Scrum Master? Is it the product owner? Is it the team themselves? Take some time if you need more, but the answer is pretty obvious to those who know they're agile. The answer, my friends, is that in Agile, the team is self-managed and self-organizing. So the best answer here is D. All right, going back to our roadmap here, the next thing I have after empowering is manage conflict. Now we talk about managing conflict. And this is a very important aspect for your exam to be able to interpret the source and stage of the conflict, to analyze the context, and then to evaluate, recommend, and reconcile. There's an order. There's a way you do things in order. You do one, then you do two, then you do three. You don't just jump to evaluating what you should do in a conflict situation. You have to understand it. And that's why when PMI gives you these enablers, you got to really understand what exactly are they saying. Because if you get a question that gives you three options, these are all things you could do in a conflict situation, but there's one you should do first before anything else. And after you've done that, then there's another you should do before the other. It's that way of thinking, my friends. So when we talk about conflict resolution, always step away calmly and wait until the other person can hear you out. Don't assume the worst. Understand that there are different temperaments at play and appeal to mutual self-interest. Be sure to attack the problem, not the person. It's a philosophy. When you get into a conflict situation, you have different characters. You have those who are not into satisfying their needs or the needs of others. They just want out. Then you have those who are all into their needs first and only their needs. That's the priority, right? Then you have those who are all about pleasing and satisfying the needs of others. And then you have someone who is kind of like a balanced mix of both. And then you have someone who is in the middle. This is a mirror of the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument, where we have two dimensions, assertiveness and cooperation. You have compromise or reconcile, which is smack dab in the middle. You have force or direct. You have collaborate or problem solve, avoid or withdraw, the person running away, and accommodate or smooth. Now, there's certain words that classify these when you talk about retreat or postpone, that's withdraw or avoid. When you talk about emphasizing areas of agreement and conceding, that's smooth or accommodate. When you talk about compromise or reconcile, it's some degree of satisfaction to temporarily or partially resolve the conflict. This is where a lot of people get this wrong. Let's go into this image one more time. Compromise or reconcile gives some relief to the parties involved. It's not wholesome, it's not complete, but watch this, there is some measure of relief. That is the difference between that and smooth or accommodate. Smooth or accommodate is all about the needs of others. But when you take a look at compromise or reconcile, it has a little bit of yours, a little bit of theirs, and you're being a little bit more assertive, but not as blindly assertive in force or direct, or positively assertive in collaborate or problem solve. Because you can have negative assertion and positive. If you're positively asserting the facts that you need to get on the same page, you're in collaborate. If you're negatively doing it, you enforce or direct. So when you come into this topic, my friends, of conflict, not only do you need to understand what conflict is at a high level, you also need to know these conflict resolution techniques. This could really help you. Force or direct is pushing your viewpoint. It usually results in win lose because the other person wins and you lose. It's usually enforced through a power position. And then you have collaborate or problem solve. Multiple viewpoints, different perspectives, and this will lead to some sort of win-win consensus. Problem solve, collaborate. This is the preferred one when there is the ability to do it. So as we go through all of these, my friends, I hope you're beginning to see how the picture is formed in the world of project management. All of these are people related. You should engage and support virtual teams, make the technologies available. You should collaborate with stakeholders. You should be addressing, removing impediments, obstacles, and blockers for the team. If you're a scrum master, if you're a project manager, you should be supporting team performance. Lastly, we have promoting team performance through the application of emotional intelligence. EI is bridling your emotions, being able to control your emotions and positively influence the emotions of others. And lastly, we have negotiate project agreements. So there's a tendency to think about negotiation as just cash, money, that kind of stuff. But when you think about negotiating in the world of Agile, we think about other things. So we're going to listen to my buddy Roy here give us a breakdown of what we could be listening to in the world of Agile when it comes to negotiating.
Yeah. So there's a contract aspect to it, and then there's just informal agreements of how we work together. Negotiating scope, negotiating how we do certain things. There's all kinds of negotiations that we go through. And the product owner is the primary negotiator. They're the ones working with the stakeholders, also known as customers and users and all that other good stuff. So they're negotiating constantly to make sure we're working on the right stuff and helping them to understand the right way to do it. And again, they're not doing that alone. The team is helping them out with that. But let's talk a little bit about contracts, right? So there are contracts as well, vendor agreements, things like that. What we're really focusing on in these arenas is more outcome focused than fix scope, right? We want to focus on what are we trying to achieve? What are the goals that we're trying to get to? Then, of course, we deliver scope in order to achieve those goals, right? But that gives us the ability to kind of roughly sketch out the scope and then have the flexibility of changing it along the way when we discover things. So it gives us a lightweight way of seeing this is what we're trying to achieve. This is how we might achieve it, discover along the way and improve that scope definition as we get closer to delivering. Just keep in mind again, the product owner is the mouth of the customers. They're the stakeholder representative, so they are there to continually negotiate, kind of playing that go between the stakeholders and the team, making sure the team understands what's being requested and the stakeholders understand how things could be done. That does not mean, though, that only the stakeholder can talk to only the product owner can talk to stakeholders. We do want the team to be able to talk with them, that direct line of sight, direct conversation, so that we can get understanding. Right, and that's really important. And the more you understand, the more you talk with each other, the better the relationship is, and you build more trust as as you're doing that. Back to you, Phil.
All right, great stuff from Roy as always. Okay, so I hope you're beginning to understand the nuances in these tasks bit by bit as we comb through the material. We are done with the people domain. I hope you have a good understanding of it now. If you are looking for a book that can help you really solidify these domains, I want to recommend our PMP Exam Immersion book. You can find PMP Exam Immersion everywhere books are sold, on Amazon especially, and we have it at a very good cost for students who are looking for an all-encompassing solution. If you hone into that book, you study it, you do the quizzes in the book, you do the final mock exam at the back of the book, you will really push your knowledge to the limit. Let's jump into the next area. The next area, my friends, is going into the world of the process domain. The process domain is the biggest on the exam in that that is 50%. So we have quite a lot to address. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the tasks, let me remind you there are certain things that I highly recommend. Number one, know thy 49 processes. Look, I have been training this course for the past 20 years. I have been training organizations for almost as long. What I realize is when you bypass a deep understanding of the five process groups, the 10 knowledge areas, and the 49 processes, at least in this world of PMI, it's very easy to get lost because a lot of the questions that have been written over the past 30 plus years in the world of the PMI were always based on that framework. And there's a continuation of that testing you on initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling and closing. So it is important that you understand what happens in each silo. If you don't, you're almost doomed. No, I don't care what other instructors says. You don't have to cram it. You don't have to know it. In my mind, you must know it. You must understand, and you must be able to give account. You should be able to tell anyone asking you as a professional, okay, what does initiating mean? What do I do there? Give me pinpoint precisely. Oh, I develop a project charter. I identify stakeholders. Okay. What do you do in planning? Oh, we just plan. Wrong answer. You got to give the details. In the world of planning, you first of all develop a project management plan shell that contains some ingredients as far as how you manage change. The change aspect is very important in planning. You got to plan change overall. And that is going to filter from one knowledge area into another. There's going to be some alignment. So if you don't develop a shell structure where you will begin inserting all your other knowledge area plans, then you're not doing it the right way. That's why planning hardly works in many organizations, just random. No, you must have a process. You must have a shell. You must understand how you're going to manage change. And then you plan scope management, you collect requirements, you define scope, you create the WBS, and then you go through in iterations, in rolling waves in many a case. But you got to understand what is the first thing I do. Do I plan schedule first? Now, I know it varies on different projects, but you, as a PM, think about it. How do I know my schedule concretely if I don't know the work? And that's why PMI put scope after you develop the shell of a project management plan, then you get into your scope. You plan the scope management. You create a scope management plan that guides you on how scope will evolve, how scope will be managed, how you're going to control the scope. And then when you're done with that, you also work on a requirements management plan, which is part of plan scope management. You see, the way PMI had it in the sixth edition is dummy proof. It's dummy proof. It makes it so easy that you have everything you need to account for. Plan scope management, collect requirements, define scope, create WBS, and then you move into scheduling. You plan schedule management. You understand how to manage your schedule based on the scope. There are various types of scope. Now, if you're working in an agile environment, you already know how you're going to manage that schedule. It's time boxing, right? It's iterations. So the need to have a big old Gantt chart goes away. At best, you have a product roadmap. You might have release plans, but the need for big old, 20,000 line long Gantt chart goes away. So you are getting into the logic of why do we do what we do on this page? Follow me, follow me. I got to show you this page because I know lots of you are bypassing it. And honestly, you're just bypassing greatness if you bypass this because this is beyond PMP. I'm telling you, based on firms I've trained, coached, and mentored, you need this stuff. You need to understand so you can give people direction, so you can show them the way as a PMP. Otherwise, what kind of a PMP are you if you cannot give me direction on how to up my PM game? So we have the shell, then we have the scope we plan, then we have the schedule elements we plan how to manage the schedule, we define the tasks, we put the tasks in order of occurrence, and we link them in a schedule. We estimate the durations, and then we have the schedule. When you have the scope understood, the schedule understood, then you've got a better idea of the cost. Now, on some projects, they just say, well, we've got $50 million, make it happen. Well, that's not enough. We need to know the scope. Don't just throw money and commands at me. Give me your availability so we can anchor down the scope because a lot of stakeholders have different ideas about the scope. And then the schedule, once you understand the scope, you got a better idea of the schedule. You know if that schedule is feasible. So these three, we call them the triple constraint. Have schedule, you have cost, you have scope, right? These three are always meant to be in equilibrium. If you change one, you're changing the entire system and something has to give. That is the logic. So in the world of cost, we plan how to manage the cost, we estimate the individual costs, we roll them up into a total budget, we account for how we're going to manage quality, we account for how we're going to manage the resources, human, equipment, materials, supplies, and facilities. We estimate how much physical resources, human resources. We plan how we're going to communicate. We plan how we're going to manage the risks, and then we identify the risks. We do a qualitative risk analysis on the identified risks. Are they high? Are they medium? Are they low? Are they high in terms of the impact they will have on the scope or the impact they'll have on the schedule or on the cost? Are they high in terms of the probability? You always need to ask probability rating, impact rating. When you're talking about anything qualitative, probability rating, impact rating, you multiply them, you're going to get a risk score. That's what we do in qualitative. In quantitative, we're dealing more with the hard facts. We're dealing with dollars and we're dealing with maybe euros or yen, whatever the currency we're dealing with. But we're going to say the probability in percent times the impact. And that could be in dollars, in pounds, in euros, in yen, whatever you're using. But we do a quantitative risk analysis on some projects, not all, because not every project needs it. And then we plan the risk responses. We also plan how to manage procurements, how we're going to conduct the procurement, and how we're going to manage the vendor. Planned stakeholder engagement is planning how do I engage my stakeholders. So you got to know all of this, my friends, and in detail. I've given you the high level. The same for executing. Directing and managing the work is really more about leadership than anything else, but it's also about how you get out a deliverable. Manage project knowledge is all about lessons learned. Manage quality is about quality assurance. As the work is being done, you're checking the quality standards, you're ensuring that quality is being met. Acquire resources is acquiring the physical and the human resources. Develop team is about developing the humans. Manage team is about giving the team, the humans, feedback. Manage communications is about distributing the information. Implementing risk responses is about carrying out the risk responses that you had over here. Conduct procurements is all about having a bid process where you send out these, we call them bid documents, whether it's an RFP, RFQ, RFI, IFN, you put that into the pipeline, you advertise it, potential sellers come back with bids. You may have a bidder conference before the bid is final. And then you might find yourself getting into some negotiations to firm it up. And then you award a contract. Managed stakeholder engagement is communicating with your stakeholders and working with them in order to keep them engaged. Then we get into monitoring and controlling. You could monitor and control the work, entire project work at a high level, and you create reports to report on that. Performing integrated change control is managing change requests as they come in from beginning to the end. What happens when you get a change request? How do you manage that? How does that pan out? Talking about change requests, my friends, a lot of folks haven't seen the change request flow, and this is important. So let me talk about it. When you have a change request, it can come in verbally, but you need to put it in formal writing in a change request form. Then you log that request in a change log. You analyze the change request with your project team, and you, the project manager, you send out the change request and the analysis to the CCB. The CCB could review that change request and analysis, and then they decide the outcome of the change request. Again, the outcome is logged in a change log, and the change log is shared with stakeholders. And if the PM and team need to do anything at that point, then they do it. Also, remember that the change control board could get in touch with the requester and see if they could negotiate something else, or they may have more information they need and they could request it. The CCB should also keep the sponsor and customer in the loop if they are not in the change control board. If they are in the change control board, then the negotiation for more information and stuff could happen, and then you get straight back into the change control board deciding the outcome. And the outcome is going to be one of these. It's going to be approved, rejected, putting it on hold, or putting it into some sort of pending status. And when it comes to the world of Agile, yeah, we handle change requests as well. But we'll talk about that much later. So, my friends, as we have been combing through that table that a lot of people are trying to avoid. I want to recommend that you know the table for every one of these. Validate scope is where the customer checks the deliverable to ensure it meets their needs. Control scope is where you prevent scope creep and gold plating. Scope creep and gold plating are interrelated. You could say that scope creep is the parent and gold plating is one of the children. Nibbling is also one of the children. When people are trying to get more than what was initially requested without going through change control, that's really scope creep. Gold plating is aiding that scope creep. When a team member decides to do more than what was requested, they're gold plating. When it hasn't gone through change control, the Superman syndrome is also responsible for that, trying to look good so you do more. All of those are big no-nos in the world of PMI. You want to give just what was required, no more, no less. Control schedule is obvious. It's making sure the schedule is well controlled, adapting if you need to. The same for control cost. There's a schedule forecast that we talk about here, and there's a cost forecast we talk about here. You want to make forecasts of tomorrow based on today, based on this rate, based on this performance, where we're going to end up. Control quality is really more of quality control, checking a deliverable after it has been produced, but it's not as good as quality assurance. Manage quality is checking the process. Control quality is checking the product. Control resources is ensuring the physical, this is only for the physical, ensuring the physical resources were used as planned. Monitor communications is checking the communications, making sure they're going according to plan. Monitor risk is taking stock of your risks and ensuring that they are under surveillance. If anything has changed, that needs to be reflected in your risk register. Control procurements is all about managing that contract. Yeah, I know it says control, but it's really more of managing what the vendor is doing. Remember, over here in procurement, this is the only knowledge area where you are the buyer. You are not the seller in procurement management. Other people are the sellers. And then going into monitor stakeholder engagement, this is where we ensure that our stakeholders are truly engaged. And if they're not, then we got to do something about it. We got to make a change. We got to pivot because we want our stakeholders to be engaged at all times. We want to do better and better in this regard. Moving on to the final thing we have here, my friends, we have the closing process group. And under closing, we have close project or phase. This is where you're closing out either the project or phase in the project. And I just couldn't let us go without talking about the 49 processes because this is what makes the exam challenging. Nobody's going to tell you, but it's what makes it challenging. Now, let me distill it down for you. At a super high level, this is how you need to be thinking about it. The integration slice at the top, where I have the yellow bar and then validate scope and then control quality and identify stakeholders, that is an example of the 80-20 rule applied to the PMBOK guide. What do I mean by that? I mean, when you take a look at the 49 processes, you can distill 20% of those down to what makes the main line. Take a look. You have developing the charter and identifying the stakeholders. That is a pillar in project management. You cannot escape those. You have to develop a charter that gives direction as to what you're doing at a high level, and you should identify your stakeholders so you understand who they are. Then you develop a project management plan. Then you execute the plan by directing and managing the project work. And at the same time, you are monitoring and controlling. Isn't it foolish to put a cake in the oven and to say, well, I guess it will bake itself? Of course, you won't do that. You check on the cake, right? Minute by minute. So, baking the cake is directing and managing, checking the temperature in the oven and checking on the cake regularly is monitor and control project work. We also have a lot of non-integration monitoring and controlling processes where we are always checking that knowledge area. Managed project knowledge is just ensuring you're always looking in the rearview mirror, having a retrospective of sorts, taking stock of lessons you learned, and teaching others so they don't make those same mistakes. Close project or phase is closing out either a phase in the project or the project as a whole. Also, control quality where you're checking the product and validate scope where your customer is checking the product are important. But if your customer has changes, you're going to have integrated change control. So these, my friends, are critical for you to understand what I call the PMBOK guide mainline. Let me show you how this mainline works. We have the project charter. This project manager isn't very happy he had to create one. The project charter fuels the identification of stakeholders. Remember, the project charter is all you've got in the beginning, so that has a key stakeholder list. It's the key stakeholder list that becomes an input to your identify stakeholders process where you're going to beef it up and get a stakeholder register. The project charter also goes to the development of a project management plan. Your project management plan is the output. You're always making this more robust. It's a living document. And as a result of its importance, it's going to fuel, direct, and manage project work. The project management plan is also going to fuel, monitor, and control project work, where we are reporting on the project at a high level. Work performance reports for the project come from monitor and control project work. We also have a main line because your project management plan, as you can see here, is going to fuel everything in monitoring and controlling. So we're showing that down below. In addition to this, your project management plan will also fuel manage project knowledge. Remember, it goes everywhere. Your project management plan goes everywhere except develop project charter and develop project management plan, where the plan is from. You also need to understand that close project or phase will also feed off your project management plan, and the same for control quality. Now, as you can see here, we have these jokers working. This is Charlie and his buddy. They're working on a project. They're going to get some output. We call those outputs deliverables. Direct and managed project work gives you a deliverable, and that deliverable, as well as work performance data, is going to control quality. Work performance data is just a raw observation on how the work is coming along. Any obstacles, any issues. We have our raw work performance data, but we need to look at that through the lens of quality, cost, and so on as relevant. The next set of jokers over here are working on a conveyor belt, checking the deliverable. We call that control quality. As a result of control quality, we're going to get work performance information. This is a very important concept that people blow past, but it could help you in your project management. We have raw data going into every monitoring and controlling process. And then we have work performance information, data, information. Data is a raw observation. Work performance information is the processed implication of that data, a more robust understanding of the meaning of that data. For example, if I say we have 50 defects, that is data. If I come back and say we have 50 defects from all of these categories and it's going to take 5 months to fix, I've given you some information. Data is like a credit card number. That could mean anything until someone tells you it's a credit card number for Bank of America. Then it's changed the information, you see. So it's extremely important you understand that flow because it's all throughout and it's helpful. as a project manager to understand data is good, but information is a higher order of consciousness, a higher order of understanding where your project is at. Moving on, my friends, as you have deliverables, they are being checked. What do you get out of checking these deliverables? Verified deliverables. When a deliverable is verified, it means it meets all the requirements. It's good to go to the customer. And here's our customer, Mr. Bean, another well-known figure in the world of entertainment and comedy, but he likes his deliverable. Apparently, he's saying, "Mwah, it's fantastic." At that point, we're going to get an accepted deliverable because a verified deliverable means we put our stamp of approval on it. An accepted deliverable means Mr. Bean, the customer, has put his stamp of approval on it. And that gets fed into closing the project or the phase. At the end of the project, there is a final product, service, or result transition to the customer. The customer's already put the stamp of approval. This is the transition, two different things. We also have a final report we send to the customer. And just remember, work performance information, when we get that out of any process, it becomes an input to monitor and control project work, and that is where we are going to get work performance reports out. And those work performance reports, they go to manage communications. They also go to performing integrated change control. And remember, your change requests go into performing integrated change control. There's also a big green main line showing you that work performance data always comes out of direct and managed project work, and it always goes in to all non-integration monitoring and controlling processes. I also show you that deliverables are very important when it comes to doing your lessons learned because a deliverable could have a story, further insights that help you in the generation of your lessons learned. This, my friends, is what I call the 80-20 principle of PMBOK. 20% of the processes give you an 80% return. So, over the past number of minutes, we have been demystifying just this. There is a part two, and the part two is the process domain. The process domain has a number of tasks similar. These will make more sense now I've shown you the overarching ideas. First of all, you got to determine the appropriate project methodology, methods, and practices to use. This will come first in the list of things in my mind because you, as a professional, you need to be able to look at your project and say, based on the Stacy model, which tells you if you're close to agreement regarding the scope and close to certainty regarding the technicality, you could use traditional. But if you're far from an understanding of the scope and the technicalities, you should probably be in the agile world. So that's the first thing you do. Then you establish the governance structure. Governance is the framework within which authority is exercised. When governance is established, you can then think about integrating your planning. Remember, I said create a shell and then begin slotting in all the other pieces. Then you got to do all the things we've been talking about. You got to plan and manage project or phase closure. You got to be intentional about it. You got to plan and manage the scope. Whether you're in agile or whether you're in traditional, you got to manage the scope. You got to manage the schedule. You got to plan and manage the budget and the resources. You got to plan and manage quality, like I showed you, of products and deliverables. You got to also think about risk, just like we mentioned. Not to mention procurement. Remember, I talked about RFPs, RFQs, RFIs, IFNs. You got to do all that stuff. And now we can execute the project with the urgency required to deliver business value. Now we can. After we have gone through these steps, we assess the opportunities to deliver value incrementally. We examine the business value throughout the project, and we support the team to subdivide project tasks as necessary to find the MVP. Let's listen to my buddy Roy one more time hit us with some understanding of executing with urgency from an agile perspective. This is a rather robust breakdown, so let's give it some time to sink in.
Yeah, so it's actually a really valuable thing to do, regardless of the process that you're following, to try to find ways of doing things incrementally, not just for gaining feedback, which is a huge value, but also you could potentially get incremental return. So if you can do things in smaller chunks, deliver them, get some kind of return, either knowledge or in funds or whatever it happens to be, delivering things incrementally can be a major benefit for your organization. Now, what we want to try to do is we want to try to build things in what we call an MVP. I want to be clear on there are three little phrases that we're going to go through: MVP, MMP, and MMF. Acronym soup here, right? But we'll get there. All right, so the intent with this is to discover the minimum amount of functionality we could deliver in order to get some kind of return out of it. And again, return could be happy customers or knowledge or whatever it happens to be. Let's talk about those three different phrases. So first, there's the MVP. That is the minimum viable product. Now, people often get the MVP confused. It's misused all over the place. Quite honestly, I misuse it intentionally because it's such a familiar term. I'll use it regardless of what I'm trying to say because it's just an easy term for people to remember. But MVP is supposed to mean to discover the minimum viable product. It is a discovery. It's a learning exercise of discovering, is this product or this thing that you're delivering, is it a viable thing that people are going to want to make use of? It does not mean you have to build anything. You could just do it as an experiment, doing some surveys, doing whatever it happens to be. That can be your minimum viable product. Just talking with people could be an MVP, just to make sure that you're going the right direction and it's something worthwhile doing, right? It's an experiment. It's a learning exercise. It could include functionality or it may not include functionality. Now, the next one is the MMP. MMP is minimum marketable product. Now, this is different. This is actual functionality. It's the smallest amount of functionality or features or scope, if you will, that you can deliver to get some kind of return. Do you always have to deliver everything in the specification or in the original request to actually get some kind of return out of it? Maybe you can incrementally do it, the minimum chunk of that functionality, in order to get some kind of return. Now, the next one is the MMF. MMF is minimum marketable feature. So MMP is the entire product, something that you are usually used. MMP is usually used when you're doing something greenfield, something brand new, something that is not already existing. You're trying to find to discover the smallest amount of stuff that you have to do to deliver that initial product delivery. MMF are the additions to that. What's the minimum set of functionality that you need to do to have a usable chunk of functionality or features or scope or whatever that's actually going to get some kind of return? So you will need to know those terms. MVP in particular is the most widely used, also the most widely misused term. But you get the idea. There are ways of encouraging the minimum. Every one of these has something in common. Minimum, right? The minimum viable, minimum marketable. There's another term actually as well, the minimum business increment. It's the same basic concept, right? It's the smallest amount of stuff that you can do to get some kind of return, right? You get the idea. So we're always focusing on the smallest amount. The PSI, it may be a piece or the whole of the MVP or MMP or whatever, right? It's doing things in small increments and sometimes assembling them to get something larger and more useful. Back to you, Phil.
All right. So that was a very deep breakdown by our buddy Roy there. And, sometimes we just have to go that deep in the world of project management professionalism to really understand all the moving parts. So, you see, in the world of Agile, when we talk about executing with urgency, there is a logic, a reasoning, there is a method to the apparent madness. We're not just doing things at random, we are planning how to inject incremental value all throughout the number of sprints we're doing gradually into our customers' pipeline. That is the idea. So, my friends, coming back over here, task one. Now that we're executing with urgency, we are ensuring knowledge transfer for project continuity. We're managing project issues. We're managing project changes as we're proceeding. We are managing project artifacts. Remember, there's three artifacts that are quite popular in Scrum: the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment. In the world of predictive, there's so many artifacts: baseline, scope baseline, schedule baseline, cost baseline. All of the plans are potential artifacts, right? And then we have the WBS, which we could consider to be part of the baseline, which is an artifact in and of itself. Moving on, we have the management of communications, communicating at all times, working with stakeholders, communicating with them, giving them clear information is important. And finally, we have engaged stakeholders, and engaged stakeholders is just really a placement for effectively plan. First of all, identify, then plan, then manage their engagement, and then monitor their engagement. This is what the process domain is all about. We are almost done, but there are just a few more things I need to point out to you. Before you exam, understand this table. You could pause the screen and ensure you understand the delivery in predictive environments is fixed. That is not hard to understand. Predictive is single delivery, right? The requirements are fixed. The delivery is a single delivery. Iterative is a single delivery. Incremental is frequent smaller deliveries, and agile is frequent small deliveries. We have different focuses. Pause the recording and ensure you understand this table. On top of this, you got to understand the business case for incremental. Incremental is best used when the frequency of delivery is high, but the degree of change is low. In other words, incremental is best when it is used for things that can be very firmly described, and you could do them in number. For example, maybe I have a widget like this one. This is a widget that is used for finger exercises. Now, as an organization that manufactures this, we could create these in batches. I could deliver 5 million of these to Amazon, but I could break down the 5 million into 500,000, 500,000, 10 deliveries. I could make it frequent deliveries, but this is very well defined. This is a good place to use incremental. But if I get into something more obscure, when the requirements cannot be as well defined as this, then it doesn't make sense to use incremental, because incremental is for batching of things that have a well defined scope. That is why Agile has its place. Agile is used when we have a high frequency of delivery, but a high degree of change. Incremental is used when we have a high frequency of delivery, but a low degree of change. And that's why, if you took a look at the table I had before this, that's why we can do frequent, smaller deliveries, because we have a very well-defined scope and it's easier to manage in that regard. So do know these before you exam, my friends. Also, one very important thing you need to understand before you exam is understand the Agile Manifesto values and principles. If you have not spent time understanding those, go to agilemanifesto.org. Make sure you understand those. Now, moving in for the final, the grand finale. it is important that you understand the world of Scrum. Let's go through it very quickly. In the world of Scrum, we talk about the product backlog being everything that customers are envisioning that they want. The product backlog is then broken down in the sprint planning event. In sprint planning, we break down the product backlog into a sliver of what we're going to do in 4 weeks or less. And that's in the sprint, the heartbeat of Scrum. Your sprint could be days or it could be weeks. It doesn't have to be 4 weeks. It could be 1 week. It could be a few days. But in industry, the sweet spot is 2 weeks. The sprint backlog is a backlog of what we're going to be executing during the sprint. We have a daily Scrum event that happens every day where the team of the product owner, Scrum Master, and developers answer the question, what have I done yesterday to move us towards the goal? What am I going to do today to move us towards the goal? And are there any impediments? But that's not the only way to run a daily scrum. You could also walk the board. So you could have a Kanban board where the team is addressing what is closest to being done and any barriers to getting those things done. You might want to Google that term, walk the board, if you don't understand what I just said. We also have a backlog refinement event in the middle of the sprint. This is non-mandatory. However, many organizations do it. At the end, you're going to end up getting your potentially shippable increment. Remember all Roy's explanations? Well, we have a sprint review event where that PSI is going to be reviewed and you're going to get some feedback, maybe some additional user stories or requests will emerge from that. And the last thing that happens is the sprint retrospective, where the team looks in the rearview mirror and they retrospect. And that's why we have the three roles, the product owner, scrum master, and we call them developers. Loosely, we call them the team in general agile. The five events, the purists won't like you calling them ceremonies, but a lot of people use that terminology anyway. And then we have the three artifacts, the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the PSI. So, my friends, the final thing we need to talk about really quick is the world of the business domain. And this is going to go pretty fast. Here is the business domain. The business domain consists of these four tasks. Number one, plan and manage project compliance. This is straightforward. If there are rules, there's governance, organization, countrywide, right? You got to plan that compliance in and you got to manage it. We have so many examples of compliance, don't we? OSHA regulations in the United States, maybe in your country, you have certain rules of the game as far as health and safety, or maybe healthcare, maybe like PCI compliance, as we have here in terms of transactions of an electronic nature. Task two, evaluate and deliver project benefits and value. Evaluate the benefits and deliver them. Track the benefits. Make sure the benefits are uncovered, they're tracked down, they don't go under the radar. Number three, evaluate and address the external business environment changes for impact on scope. Make sure you're always surveying the external environment and understanding how what is happening geopolitically in the marketplace, in your environment could affect your project. And number four, support organizational change. And this just means ensure you are taking stock of how your organization's culture could affect your project and how your project could affect the organization. It's very straightforward. There's one that I want us to go in a little bit on, and that is the concept of environmental impacts. Let's listen to my buddy Roy break this down some more.
I'm glad they're talking about the backlog. That's a very positive change. So obviously, observing and monitoring and all that sort of thing is really not that much different than you would do. That's a business thing. Your product management community, if you have one, they would be doing these sorts of things. And that part doesn't change. The part that does change, though, is that we're able to make those changes a lot faster. So if something is happening in the market, we don't have to wait 6 months or a year to implement it because of current projects. We change it now, or as early as is practical anyway. And the main reason that we can do that is because it's less impact to our schedule, less impact to our projects. We can make those changes a lot faster with significantly less impact to our project. All right, back to you, Phil.
All right, good stuff from Roy there, as always. So, my friends, now you've got a good idea about that. Let's just talk one more time about what Agile is, which is the organizational change part. Extremely important. Let's listen. So, Roy, how do we think about supporting organizational change from this perspective?
Yeah, this is huge in the Agile space. And the main reason is to enable Agile to work properly, you need to change the organizational culture. It has to happen. To support things like, experimentation and the ability to fail and removing impediments as quickly as possible. All of these things may be contrary to the way that your organization is set up and contrary to the culture. So as project managers, as Scrum masters, you need to be evangelists and champions of the process and encourage that change by educating your leaders, educating your business partners, your stakeholders, making sure they really understand what this is all about. Organizational change, let's say this, the biggest barrier to Agile adoption is organizational culture. So if you're looking for one thing that's going to be your biggest problem, it's the organization itself, the culture of the organization. So you need to pay particular attention to that because you're going to see behaviors that are more traditional in an Agile environment. But in an Agile environment, those traditional behaviors don't work, right? If we're expecting to see things the same way, do things the same way, and just do Agile, you will fail. It will not go well for you. You may get some benefits, but eventually you're going to start seeing where the organization is going to get in the way, and you will start very quickly falling back into traditional approaches because this Agile thing doesn't work here, right? And it's not that Agile can't work there, it's that your organization is just not changing to allow it to happen. All right, Phil, back to you.
All right, great stuff from my buddy Roy. Let's take a quick look at a question here I have for you. In Scrum, what do we call the individual detailed pieces of work needed to convert a product backlog item into working software? Hint, they make up the sprint backlog and are often estimated in hours. All right, well, I'm hoping you got the answer right. The best answer, talking about hours, it wouldn't be use cases. We don't estimate those. Definitely not in hours. It wouldn't be stories because we don't estimate stories in hours. Scrum bits is a made up word, and therefore the answer is task. Okay, my friends. So, my question to you is how are you going to work towards your PMP? Let me give you a few questions to think about. Here's one. If you saw a question like this, would you be able to answer it? Would you feel confident? What about if you saw a question like this? How would you feel about this one? How about a question like this? You see where I'm going with this? I'm trying to help you see where these questions are headed. They're highly situational. And for that reason, if you're getting ready for the PMP exam, I want to recommend that you use a tool, a system that is tested and tried and reliable. If you do not have a solution, my friends, that I've described, and you need audio, video, quizzes, mock exams, books, an all-encompassing solution, you need to go to course.pmradio.org to sign up. In this program, we have 35 hours of education with both my buddy Roy and I. This was recorded live with a live audience. You're going to have agile training, Scrum, deep training. The immersion training that I'm giving you now is just like 1 out of 20 of this course. It's very robust. So if you're having trouble understanding the concepts and you want more learning, maybe you are even certified and you don't have solid education in this. Maybe you got certified, but you know deep down, I don't get this agile stuff. I don't get this Scrum stuff. I don't even get half of what Phil said about the processes. You need to be on this program. And the way to join is right now going down to course.pmradio.org. It's full PMP exam coaching. It's 35 hours of training. So you will take a mock exam, you take quizzes, you satisfy the requirements of passing all the quizzes and the mock exam. You get your certificate of completion of 35 contact hours for your exam. If you really mean business and you want to be anchored in to be successful in your PM world for life, this is the course for you. Course.pmradio.org. Go on there right now. As I said, you got 35 hours of training with Roy and I. You got a book, PMP exam immersion. You got all that you need. It's like a done for you solution where you won't need to look anywhere else. You have everything that you need, and you're going into the belly of the beast. And more importantly, it was recorded, like I said, live. So it's very engaging. It's not boring. It's not like a talking head. And you hear Roy and I interacting in a lot of the videos. This is the course you want to take for your PMP, or if you are certified, it's the course you want to take to catch up. I will just call it a catch up course for those of you who got certified way before and you need a top up. Maybe you're going for an interview, you don't feel confident, or you're going for even the CAPM exam and you feel, okay, I just need to learn a little bit more of deeper agile to feel confident, or a little bit of deeper traditional. This is the course. Don't miss a beat. Going down, I'm going to put it on the screen again, course.pmradio.org. There it is. And once you get in the program, you will immediately begin to feel more confident that you can kill this thing, you can crush this thing. Okay? Thank you for joining me today. I wish you all the very best. Remember, just keep going, pedal to metal, hit that pedal hard daily. I need you to show up for your PMP daily. Now, I am a PMP. My career has been absolutely like night and day compared to when I was not certified, but I had a master's degree, right, in construction IT versus when I added PMP to the mix. Geometric progression, my friends. Geometric. Seriously. I know a lot of people are like, I don't want to take that PMP exam. And, I know people have their gripes with the PMP exam itself, but my friend, don't let the opportunity pass you by. All right. Going down to course.pmradio.org. I'll see you in the program. Bye for now. So, to answer the question that came in before we jump off about what you get in the training program, apart from the videos, you get an electronic download of this product. It's called Project Management Audio Digest. If you're struggling with the traditional pieces and you're an auditory learner, this could wildly help you. You're also going to get an electronic download of PMP Exam Immersion, which is a 500 plus page book. And you're also going to get a download of Agile Principle Run and Cut. All of these are vehicles to help you succeed. And on top of that, you get access to PMP Doctor, which has a task quiz for each of the 35 tasks. So you're going to get 35 quizzes. You're going to get two full-length mock exams and one half-length mock exam. And you're going to get so many other knowledge area quizzes, short quizzes, medium quizzes, long quizzes, just to get through the learning system. I'm telling you, it is going to be worth your while because you're going to be testing your knowledge on the regular. It's going to give you cadence, it's going to give you structure, and it's also going to give you community where you can interact with your coach and ask questions. All right. So, again, thank you for the question. I believe we've cleared it all out now. All right. I wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the program. Smash that like button if you've enjoyed this. and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.